Hi guys, I don't agree with Andrew Neil's politics, but I do respect him as a journalist. However, from time to time, he says things that are, well, let's just put it, wrong. Now, he's pushing this narrative that British people want Scandinavian-style public services, but at tax rates similar to the United States. Now, that's not actually something that's possible, but there are other fundamental problems with that. Have a listen.
How much of that is to the fact that we are too demanding as an electorate, and we've never quite... you might say this has been ever thus, and actually politicians are no worse now than they were in the past. I'm interested in your thoughts on that, actually, that we demand all sorts of things that aren't very compatible. We want lower taxes and we want a bigger state, and politicians have got used to not levelling with us. And Kate did a great interview with Darren Jones earlier, the Chief Secretary to the Treasury, which was a real brilliant piece of interviewing by her, and a real piece of not saying anything back from him because he couldn't really be open and honest and said, you know what, we need to do this because we can't have lower taxes and a massive state. We've got to pick one, and we're going to do this, and we're going to level with you. And their manifesto didn't level with us. None of the manifestos of any of the parties level with us. How much is that on them? How much is it on us that we don't seem to have a actually rational conversation about what the state should and shouldn't do?
It's a bit on them and it's a bit on us. But I would blame them more than us. I mean, the British do have the view that they can have Scandinavian levels of welfare from the cradle to the grave, but mid-Atlantic tax rates, a little higher than America, but not nearly as high as Europe. And it can be done. And it's a conceit that the British have long believed in, but they've been encouraged to do so by largely Labour politicians. The British social democracy is not honest in a way that European social democracy is honest. The European Social Democrats, from the Scandinavians to the Germans to the French Socialist Party, say, look, you want extensive welfare, we're going to do it, but it means your basic rate of tax is going to be very high. It can't just be done on taxing the rich. Everybody's going to have to pay more tax. And in Europe, they do. In Britain, the Labour Party in particular, but also the Lib Dems and others to the left, have said, yep, we're going to give you European levels of welfare. We're going to be as good as Scandinavia, as good as Germany. And by the way, you won't have to pay European levels because we're going to tax the rich. Hence, you've got all this talk again about a wealth tax, or the idea that simply by increasing the higher rates of income tax, we can pay for all this, or non-doms, or VAT on private school fees. And it's a nonsense. There just isn't enough there to do it. There is no major European social democracy in which the basic rate of tax plus social charges, in other words, in British terms, the basic rate of tax plus national insurance, is not considerably higher on the average worker than it is in Britain. It's higher everywhere else with the extensive welfare states. And until the British make up their mind, and the politicians are more honest with them, look, you have a trade-off here. You want a more extensive welfare state? Then you're going to have to pay more tax, and it isn't going to be just Mr. and Mrs. Moneybags that will be paying the tax. Or if you want a less extensive welfare state, or you want mid-Atlantic levels of tax, then you're going to have to accept the welfare state will not be as comprehensive or generous as it is in Sweden or Finland or Denmark.
Okay, so a fundamental problem with this, I want to start off with, is that the UK currently spends less than the OECD average. So I don't know if you can see the graph here. The United Kingdom is just below the Czech Republic when it comes to welfare spending, and this is data from 2022. So the countries that Andrew Neil talked about, Germany, France, Italy, Austria, Denmark, Finland, they are way above the United Kingdom. So anyone who's talking about, well, you know, we just need to adjust the tax system a little bit, or, you know, welfare is too high in the UK, is talking rubbish. Welfare is the support ordinary people receive on welfare is much lower than other parts of Europe and other parts of the OECD. Now, there are some other fundamental problems. When we hear about, well, where is the money go? All this money has been spent on welfare. Well, how come people are worse off? And that, once again, there's less spent on welfare, but people are also worse off. A fundamental problem, and I keep talking about, is where the money is going. So when people talk about, well, more money for the NHS, is that money actually going into the NHS? When they talk about welfare, is that money actually going into welfare? So you can see here, and I'll leave a link to all the data that I've been presenting here. How many private renters receive housing support universal credit in 2023? An estimated 24% of private renters receive housing support in 2022-2023. 28.8% of private renters found it very or fairly difficult to pay rent. So where is this money going? So money is going from central government to people to pay their rent. And is that money going to pay for council rent? No, a lot of it is actually going to private owners. It's going to individual landlords or companies that offer this service, housing. That's not money going back into the system. That's money going into the pockets of private individuals or into the pockets of shareholders in those companies. This is a massive problem. So whenever you hear about the budget for welfare is going up and, well, you know, we need to kick people off benefits or we need to force people into work because the bill is too high, well, you have to look at where the actual money is going. For example, it says here, according to this report from the New Economics Foundation, government subsidising private landlords £70 billion over the next 5 years. So once again, a lot of public money, taxpayer money, is going into the private sector and it's not being replenished. It's not going in to build new homes or to fund councils. It's going into the pockets of private landlords and those companies that provide those services. Now, as I mentioned before, it's also a problem in the NHS. Fresh increase in NHS spending on private providers. Once again, you hear about how the budget for the NHS is going up. Yes, but where is that money going? Lots of money going into the NHS, but how much is actually staying in it? How much is being filtered off to the private sector? Well, it says here, according to this report, about 5.9% in real terms is going to the private sector. So it would make sense. That's £11.5 billion. So you need to bring that money down. This would help the NHS because this money, once again, is not going into the NHS to buy equipment, to pay doctors and nurses. This is going into the pockets of private individuals, these companies or shareholders. So when people like Andrew Neil talk about, well, you know, the budget is too high or there's too much money being spent on welfare or, you know, people want to have Scandinavian style systems, it's important to remember that if you want to have a Scandinavian style system, two things are important to remember. First of all, you need to increase taxes on pretty much everyone, but of course the richest need to pay their share. But also the money needs to go back into the system and not into the hands of private individuals, because there's no point in increasing the budget if a lot of it is going into the pockets of the private sector. Let me know in the comment section, guys, what do you think about all of this? As always, your comments are greatly appreciated, and I'll see you in the next video.